just saw you post something, thanking everybody, and I'm like, I didn't have that.
Okay, good morning.
Same as my name. Yeah,
Good morning, everyone.
you guys are probably seeing me, so yeah.
So it's time to get started. And
You're not
would you
listening.
like to open us in prayer? So good morning. We are going to get started, and we do have a tradition that we open in prayer. So I'd like to ask everyone to please stand for prayer and the pledge.
All right, dear Heavenly Father, thank you this morning. It's an early morning, but it's a beautiful morning and a beautiful place to be in the United States of America and in Idaho. Thank you for the folks that are here in attendance, these folks in red, Lord, all of the years that many of them have spent just serving our community, and a fun place for so many to come in and venture. So our meeting today, hope it go well. Also going to say, as a little prayer for Dan, I understand he's retiring after this year. So the doc, congratulations to that. Police officers over here in the blue, we got the red and the blue this morning. And just thank you for the safety of our officers, especially yesterday with all that happened, and the job that they're doing, and just to protect them and their families each and every day. We just give you praise for this day in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you, Joe, for praying. Okay, roll call.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Bruner.
Here.
Jingula. Here. Reynolds.
Here.
Haverfield.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. So good morning. As we get started, welcome. We have a number of staff members here, but thank you to our Snake River Stampede team that's here. We appreciate it. I think as we get started this morning, I didn't ask who's going to go first. Jeff Agenrod, thank you. So I guess the Stampede's going to start and talk to us about the date change, so thank you. And we are on, I should say, I just was skipping in, we are on our new business item 1.1, and this is an action item. It always says actions. Actually, we don't take action in this meeting. It's a workshop, but it is the Snake River Stampede Rodeo date change proposal.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Council. Appreciate you being here with us this morning. Happy to discuss Snake River Stampede and hopefully gain your support with an impending move that we're contemplating. The people of Nampa built and own the Snake River Stampede, Nampa's premier event. Our volunteer board is honored to be entrusted with the community support to continue this century-old tradition. Additionally, the Stampede and City of Nampa have enjoyed a strong relationship since 1911 when the rodeo began on the streets of Nampa. We've grown together over the 100+ years, bringing us here today. While the final numbers aren't in, it appears the 2023 rodeo will set new attendance and revenue records. As we discuss the proposed move of rodeo dates from July to June, starting in 2025, it may be helpful to quickly review the history of the partnership between the Fort Idaho Center and the Snake River Stampede. This will provide some context around the mechanics of our agreements and the whys of our current relationship. In 1992, the Snake River Stampede and the city both recognized the need for a new stadium for community events, including the rodeo. In order to facilitate the city's ability to move forward with a new stadium, the Stampede deeded 23 acres and the stadium it owned on Garrity Boulevard to the city. Today, the Boys and Girls Club, Rodeo Park Baseball Field, the Stampede Skate Park, Snake River Elementary School, the Hispanic Cultural Center, and Pipeco all reside on the property transferred to the city by the Stampede. In return for the property, the city agreed to provide an arena for the rodeo as long as the rodeo were in existence. Since that time, the Stampede has contributed over $6 million directly to the Idaho Center complex. Most recently, we've provided $100,000 for the RV park expansion. And this morning, we'd like to present you with a gift transfer of another $90,000 in gates and panels for the continued use in the horse park. We'll ask our newly elected president, Clint Childs, to present that transfer of ownership. So we do come bringing gifts.
Thank you, Clint. Very good. Thank you. What a gift. Thanks.
Now what are you going to do with those?
Yeah.
Are they in the hall?
Same thing you've been doing with them for the last nearly 30 years. So you'll have the ownership and ability to do what you wish. So for setting records, you may ask, why mess with success? That's a question we had to ask ourselves as we considered the future of the rodeo. Attracting the best contestants and rodeo stock in the world is key to the quality of our rodeo. In the meantime, the world of rodeo is changing, and if we're going to continue to succeed, we need to adjust as well. A year ago, we recognized we weren't getting our share of the best cowboys and cowgirls, nor the rodeo livestock. Our question was, why was this happening, and what could we do about it? The answer was we were no longer the largest rodeo in the United States the third week in July with the most prize money. Despite raising our purse last year to a record level, we were the second largest rodeo. And this year, we were the fourth largest rodeo during the third week in July. That means the contestants now have several other opportunities to earn more money someplace other than the Stampede. This results in us drawing fewer top contestants to compete at our rodeo. An obvious solution is to raise our prize money. Unfortunately, this is a zero-sum game, and the other rodeos would respond by also increasing their prize money, and their pockets are much deeper than ours. The competition for the best contestants is further impacted by contestants' injuries and the economics of rodeo. The further we get into the rodeo year, the fewer contestants are available to compete. These same challenges also hold true for acquiring the best quality rodeo stock, livestock. It is critical that we continue to attract the best contestants and livestock to provide a world-class event our fans have come to expect. As we considered our options, it became clear that despite the challenges created by a date change, it was the best path forward. Moving dates and locations are not new to the Stampede. Over the last nearly 110 years, the Stampede has moved locations 5 times, from the streets of Nampa to the Ford Idaho Center. And during that time, we've also changed our dates 4 times, from September to the 4th of July, to the 3rd week of July, and now to the 3rd week of June. After careful consideration and input, we've selected the 3rd week in June to hold our rodeo. This date change resolves our contestant livestock problems while attempting to minimize the amount of disruption of others affected by this move. And these people include the Ford Idaho Center, the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association, the fans, our volunteers, and those we contract our stock with. We recognize the amount of work that has been done to date to make this move and the immense amount of work before us to complete this by 2025. We look forward to your support and working with the city and the Ford Idaho Center to make this successful move. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or defer the tough ones to somebody else.
Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciated the overview. That's helpful. Council, do you have any questions?
I do, Mayor. So over the last, let's say, 5 years, that the Stampede has brought so much help to our economy and revenue. So what would you think your numbers would be by changing the dates?
Councilman Rodriguez, I appreciate the question because that's something that we have to look at as well. Our revenue sources are 2 sources primarily, our ticket sales and our sponsorships. That's the largest pieces of what drives the rodeo. So moving those dates, how would that impact what we're doing? And anytime you move a tradition, and particularly a date of a tradition, you put yourself at risk. But as we look at the growth of the valley, and actually one of the things that works against us that 3rd week in July is the heat. even though we don't have an outdoor event, the livestock are outside all day, so they don't perform as well as they would, even though they're performing inside. The fans, we've started selling out a couple, 2, 3 performances. We expect that to continue, and I don't see any plans to expand the seating in the Idaho Center, so we've opened up the amphitheater. And a June date would be a lot more conducive to bringing more fans to the outside arena if they're not fighting the heat. So I see a neutral impact, if not a increase in bringing our fan base.
Follow-up, Mayor. Jeff, I was always thinking that if the Stampede, and let's say in their 5-year projection, what are the projects do you have going? For example, the horse park facility is not being used when the Stampede is running. And I was thinking about maybe increasing that as well, that activity, for example, high school rodeo, or anything else like that, something associated with the rodeo. The second thing is when is the Stampede going to invest, or should they invest in their own building that's a good facility for you all, instead of working out of where Lynn works, out of just the IC tickets? I'd like to see that. Is that in the makings, or are we still going to just go as is?
Thanks for the question. I think that puts into context the agreement that we have that actually started in 1992. So the decision was made by the Stampede Board at that time. We had a 10,000-seat outdoor stadium. You remember the old Green Queen. And it had served us well. We moved into that in 1950 and served us up through the move to the Idaho Center in 1997. But at that point in time, the Stampede Board made a decision, rather than to build a new stadium of 10,000 people that's used 1 week out of the year, that just didn't make economic sense. At the same time, the city of Nampa was looking at property. In fact, at that point in time, as I go back through the minutes, the city of Nampa was looking to build a facility actually on that Garrity site, on that 23 acres, and then it later moved out to where the Idaho Center is located today. So that was the decision we made to take our, and now $6 million that we've invested in the facility that we're in. So as long as it continues to work for both parties, as long as we're within the agreements that we've established, I wouldn't see us pursuing that at this point.
I was thinking maybe we should, excuse me, Mayor, I was thinking that maybe expanding the contract, that's why I was saying that, for better business down the road. That's all I.
And the contract, I think, was well thought out, and as I read it, and you look at a contract that's over 30 years old now, and the Idaho Center wasn't really even a concept. The layout, even the location, and the agreement that was established by the people before us really was foresightful, and I believe hit the mark. So I'm not standing before you today asking that we modify the contract in any other place than actually changing the July date to a June date, and still keeping the same relationship that we've enjoyed for this many years.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman.
Jeff, I think this is great. And again, it's been fun to be a part of what's happened in Nampa over those 30 to 40 years. And thank you for your leadership. The only thing I was looking at was the dates of the God and Country Rally to make sure that there wasn't a conflict, which there does not appear to be. But I was wondering, had you reached out to the leadership board there to determine if maybe you could combine the God and Country Rally with the Snake River Stampede? I mean, it would just enhance both as far as from a visibility standpoint, having our fireworks display as a city near the Snake River Stampede timeframe.
Councilman Haverfield, a great question. No, we have not actually reached out to God and Country Rally. We've been really not keeping this top secret, but we don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse, if you will. So the first people that we reached out was actually Andrew at the Idaho Center, to see what kind of, what would that take? Because we recognize that the Idaho Center has built a horse park schedule around our rodeo date over the last 30 years. And so that isn't an easy thing to change. And they run into similar challenges that we do as a rodeo within the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association. The other people that we talked to was the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association, because they keep the schedule of rodeos and approve the dates for the rodeos. It wouldn't make sense for us to select a date in Nampa, Idaho, when really the bulk of the rodeos on the tour are in Texas. Because what's the likelihood they're going to leave 10 rodeos, we'll call it the first week in May, to come to Idaho for one rodeo and then go back. So we would really not probably be solving our problem by being able to attract the best contestants. So it's a lot of things coming together, but I certainly think that that's a discussion that we should have and see if we can, whether we combine those events or at least pull them closer together. This move would naturally pull us closer together in time, and I think that would benefit both of us.
So Mayor, as a follow-up, I'd like to introduce you to Dale Reynolds. He's online, and I believe he's still on the God and Country Rally Board, so that you two can get together and talk about this a little bit further.
Great idea, and I'm happy to visit with Dale about that.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions? I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for reaching out to Andrew early on. I know that this has been under consideration for quite some time, and thank you for honoring and understanding the challenge that it is with these shows. Also, I so appreciate the great working relationship that you guys have with the Fort Idaho Center. I know it's a huge partnership. It's important, right? Because with the staff there and the work they do, and I just want to say thank you. And also to the team here and all the others, because it's a huge feat to put on a rodeo, right? And you have amazing volunteers, and the fact that it's done with one paid employee and all other volunteers is pretty amazing. So thank you for that. But I really appreciate you working and talking to Andrew early on so he could be thinking and talking with the horse, the different horse shows and figure it out. So unless there's anything else from you, we'll switch over to Andrew, but we'll come back if we have questions.
Okay,
so
great, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see Dale. So Dale, did you have a question?
No, Madam Mayor, I'm fine. I'll talk to Senator Agnew about what Randy was talking about in the future. I don't see it as an impact to us at all for God and Country.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, Dale. Good morning, Andrew.
All right, good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me out today. So about a year or so ago, maybe a little longer, Jeff approached me and said, hey, we're thinking about this move, so what does this look like on the calendar? So I'm here today to kind of explain how the mechanics of rodeo logistics work on our end and where our June shows end up and where we rearrange all the pieces. So general overview of the rodeo contract that we directly interface with. We have 14 days contracted with the Snake River Stampede, the city of Nampa, that is. And that's the 14 days that they can do whatever they want, rodeos, concerts, trade shows, you name it. And then we, as a venue, do about 7 to 14 days of setup on the front end. Usually it's about a week. This year we got a 2-week jump on it just because the calendar lined out that way. So we were able to get a big head start in the arena, which was always great. Then there's about 7 days of teardown and cleanup to 100% transition the property back to be equine ready for our next horse show. And historically, the horse park calendar schedules around the impact of the rodeo to ensure that we can maximize rodeo needs, but also provide the proper facilities for the horse park. So moving into June 2025, we have 2 events in that month. So there's a Knockout Reining, which is about a 500 horse show. It's one of George King's shows. He produces 3 here with us, and he's the largest show producer that we currently host as the Fort Idaho Center. And then there's also a Region 4 Arabians, which is a little bit smaller, but still of a pretty large size, 460 horses, 50 RVs, and lasts a little less than a week. So going back to reining, we were able to work with George, and he's traditionally in early to mid-June. He is going to move up on the calendar into late May, early June, which will give us a week between his show and rodeo load-in starting. So that's plenty of time. That gives us our 7-day window, essentially, prior to rodeo beginning, so that works there. However, Region 4 Arabians directly conflicts with actual rodeo performance dates in 2025, and they're unable to move. We're still working through some logistics, hoping there's a opportunity to still host them, but their ideal dates were George King's new dates, so where the knockout reining is going to go in 2025. And we do have dates opening up in July, but chances are we can't take Region 4 Arabians and push them into July, as they have local shows and national shows scheduled on either side, and you need X amount of time on each side to qualify, then dead time, get to the next show. So we're examining all our options, but it looks like that one is gonna go away. Financial impact of the two shows, based on the Idaho Horse Park Economic Impact Report, total economic impact of the two shows is about $2.53 million of direct impact, and there's also a calculator of a ×4 turnover rate for a total of about $10 million economic impact across those two shows. So they're pretty large. People stay in the hotels, use the facilities, use the RVs, shop local, eat at the restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a large impact, and that's part of why the horse park's there and the rodeo's here to produce economic impact. So my recommendation is to form a subcommittee to review the impact of the date change on the Fort Idaho Center operating budget and the calendar.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you for working with those, because with both of those groups. I know George King has 2 shows.
3 now.
3 now, yeah, and they're really important shows. And it's great that he can move, so that's awesome. Arabians, yeah. And you know what, I know one thing that Andrew and I talked about was that he'll continue to work with them. Sometimes it takes a few years to see, there's 2 principles and you don't know which way it's gonna go, right? Sometimes when you lose a show, whether it's in the Fort Idaho Center or whether it's a horse show, they never come back. It just is what it is. Once they're gone, they don't come back. Other times, after a few years, because it takes, it's a domino is really what it is. It's just a domino. You move this one and then that one and that one. So the bigger of the 2 shows, they're both important, but it's great that George King was willing to work with you and be able to move. And so it sounds like the impact is the Arabian show. And just candidly, there is a fiscal impact. It's just the bottom line impact, which I don't think you showed, but the bottom line impact of the show, you lose that revenue. And so the revenue that you lose off of the Arabian show is approximately?
It's about $80,000 net.
On that one show, okay. So that would be the fiscal impact, just so that we're all aware of that one show. If we can't rearrange it or fill it with something, but the goal will be to fill it, right? To figure out how to fill it, and so we've got enough time to do that. So actually, and I think it sounds as though, because you've had the time to work on it, that you are able to make the move and that you're ready, and you could say, yes, there is a fiscal impact. And so because the council's role here is budget, right? You look at budget. But thank you to the Stampede for working so far in advance, right? Because that really makes it a whole lot easier, right? Because you've been thinking about this, you're talking about it. And so really it's a matter of forming a subcommittee and maybe working through what to do with it. And other than that, I think it sounds like it'll work. I'm not seeing why it wouldn't work.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just to follow up on my question to Jeff, was the God and Country Rally, is that enough time when the Stampede's over for you to be able to continue to honor the God and Country Rally dates being the last week of?
Yes, it wouldn't have an effect on that.
Okay, thank you.
Could you repeat the dates again? The anticipated dates that we're moving it?
July 11 through 25,
It's the
2025?
third week of July.
No, the new date, the date we're moving to for the rodeo. It will be June.
Yeah, third week of June.
It's the 3rd week in July. It always starts on a Tuesday and ends on a Saturday. So in 2025, it would be June 17th through the 21st. The following year in 26, 16th through the 20th. 27 is 15th through the 19th. 28 is 20 through 24. And then in 2029, boy, that seems like a long ways away, June 19th through the 23rd.
Thank you.
And is the God and Country Rally the last Wednesday of the month of June every year?
Traditionally.
Okay.
Good. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. I also just wanted to say it's pretty exciting seeing the expansion of the rodeo. The outdoor amphitheater events that you're doing, the new event that this year out in the, in the other venue, I wasn't able to get over there. Maybe the times will shift in the future. I know that you'll look at it, but hopefully, I think it was a great option. So there's continued opportunity, right, ahead of you, which is exciting.
Mayor, quick question
Yes.
on the amphitheater. Just curious, what type of attendance did you have this year in the amphitheater? Do you have those stats? Very close.
Councilman Bruner, we don't keep separate stats for the amphitheater.
Oh, okay.
We sell tickets to the amphitheater and we sell them inside, but all those that are inside are able to come outside. What I can tell you that in the 5 days of the rodeo, 6 performances, 5 days, we had 76,000 people come through our activities, and that would include the amphitheater. So it's relatively new, and the heat is our challenge. So once the sun goes down, if you remember the old Green Queen, that's when it became fun at the rodeo. So once the sun went down and the stars are out and the temperature cools off, and that's when it becomes attractive. But as we look at, we had a band in the amphitheater each night after the rodeo, and if you go out there, even on a Tuesday night, and have 3,000 or 4,000 people hanging out, on a work day, if you will, that shows the popularity.
Just, if I may, Mayor, just a couple other quick questions. So concert, was that somewhat, I know they've had music in the past. Was this was every night there was some type of concert, right? And was that also well attended?
Yes, and when we say concert, we did have a popular regional act that is on the charts, but for the most part, these are smaller regional bands that aren't like the concerts that we would normally see necessarily at the Idaho Center. They're really to complement the rodeo rather than to overshadow the rodeo.
And I have a 94-year-old mother that repeats herself. I'm starting to do that too, by the way. But anyway, she says, "Oh, I just miss all the stars that used to come, the Gene Autry's, the Dale Evans, the Roy Rogers, and so on." And overall, I've been impressed. I mean, there's no question the act that I saw on 2 different occasions, he was amazing, but it didn't really just send me over. Okay, watching that. So just kind of continue with whatever the rodeo, the best act that is available, and maybe that also these new dates open up probably maybe even something that may be a little better. I don't want to put that act down because.
And you're referring to the clown act or the specialty act during the rodeo?
Specialty act.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that's changing in the rodeo world is there's fewer and fewer of those acts. We can bring back some of the popular ones, and we will, but we don't want to continue to bring the same one each year. So
right.
it is a challenge, and that's probably one of the things that gets the most conversation with regard to the rodeo is that specialty act.
Okay.
We had a specialty act a year ago that was an act that had been here and was a fan favorite back in the old Green Queen, Whiplash. Whiplash didn't perform as well as he did way back when, and I can share, hopefully I'm not speaking out of school, but that maybe the rodeo board was less than happy with the caliber that it turned out. But we got more positive fan input about how good Whiplash was. So sometimes the way we view things isn't necessarily what our fans are looking for.
Mayor?
Yes.
I just remind Darrell, I don't think, unless we have cardboard cutouts, that Roy Dale and...
Well, I at least Trigger. I don't care about the others.
Okay.
Now that Dr. Tiller's retiring, maybe he has an act that he can bring. Who knows? Okay.
That's great. Thank you. So I think the next step actually is to identify who would be the representative from the rodeo that would sit down with us, and we'll sit down and talk further about the implications. I'll just candidly, there is a fiscal impact. And thank you, by the way, for the $90,000 gift towards the panels and continuing to grow out that infrastructure there that is needed. So thank you. And the contribution back. Actually, the Fort Idaho Center, anytime you build something, right, hindsight's always 20/20. right? But, so there have been those little hiccups that we're all aware of, right, in the building, like the height of the roof and different things. But it's been a great venue. It's something that we can be very proud of as a community. The build out of the horse park and the opportunity, there's tremendous potential there. The concerts, and Andrew, they've done an absolutely amazing job in the midst of a very difficult season, because the touring season, I mean, and knowing what's coming in, it is not easy. It is really hard. But we've done a good job, and I feel like we've really worked diligently to maximize the utilization of the facility. And so what began as a dream back in 1992 to see this many years now of it being utilized and utilized well, and the potential, and it is an important place in the Northwest. And so that's exciting. So, I really do appreciate, I know Rodeo Week is not an easy week. And over the years, it's been hard, even with the Fort Idaho Center staff and trying to figure it out and all the dynamics. But I appreciate today where we are today, the great working relationships, the collaboration that's taking place. That is huge. And so thank you for that. And for bringing the wildest show, is it the wildest show on earth? Yes. It's great that that's here in Nampa. Thank you guys for making it happen. So we will identify a small group that'll consist of probably Councilman Haverfield as council president. We'll incorporate Doug Racine on finance, and then somebody from your team, whoever that is, let us know, and we'll come back together and figure it out. So, but I don't see any problems with the date. Yes, Clint.
Just real quick, we will have a committee, and Jeff will be there.
Go ahead and come. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So one of the things, thank you, Clint Child. One of the things I'm in the process of doing right now is assigning all of our committees as the new president. We will have a committee dedicated specifically to this, and Jeff Agenbrod will be the chair of that. But we'll have a number of people to help identify everything, including the big part, which is the relationship with the city and the Idaho Center.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Jeff. We'll just be back in touch, and we'll do a follow-up meeting. We won't try to figure it all out today in this meeting, but we'll do a follow-up meeting. And I don't know the workshops are not. We had action item on there because it's just traditionally we do that on our agendas, but we don't typically take action in our workshops. I don't know that this is. I guess maybe it will be an action item. I'm not sure. If there were any changes to the contract, that would be an action item. But as far as the date itself, does it work? And it sounds like the date works. So I think that we're moving forward.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the fact that you're seeing what we're seeing and supportive of the date move. The date is actually in the contract, so we would have to change the contract to recognize the June date rather than a July date.
Okay. So that'll come back before the council when we authorize the changes to the contract. In the meantime, we'll schedule some meetings and talk about that. And if there's anything else we need to discuss, then we'll be done.
Mayor,
Yes.
on behalf of the council, your success is our success as a community, so that's what's going to be important to me. I just want you to know that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Okay, so there are sandwiches at the back. You're welcome to set through our next agenda item if you want to. I'm sure you would love to do that, but there are sandwiches in the back. And Andrew, did you have anything more? You're good. Okay, so there's sandwiches at the back if you want any. So thank you for joining us this evening, or morning. Yes. Curtis, did you have a comment?
Just thank you all for your support and coming to the rodeo. That's what keeps it going, so we appreciate each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay, we have a lot of staff here this morning. Yeah, I'm sure you want to hear the discussion, right, regarding travel. So our next item, and staff, you're welcome to grab something to eat while you're sitting there. Our next item this morning is the FY24 department request for conferences, travel, and food. And we did commit to the council that we would come back for some discussion around that. And so today is the first of more than one discussion, but Doug's done some research. You have a handout in front of you, and Doug's going to walk us through it. So Doug, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
does this have anything to do with the Idaho Wine Commission as well?
I don't think so.
Is there a conference there? I know.
And I think, Doug, you are going to show it on the screen. Yeah,
Right.
thank you. At the conclusion, we have, it's not on the agenda, but it's not an action item, and I think I'd like to ask Kurt Schenkel at the end maybe to come up and give us just an update. You had a full day yesterday. And I will say, while we're waiting, I visited with Councilman Haverfield about the communication that took place to the council after the incident that we took place, and I realized that it happened about 1:30. And then Kurt and I talked about 2:30, and then Carmen did get an email out about 2:53, I think maybe, something like about there. But it had hit the news first. And so you guys, I know Randy heard it from a phone call that he got from someone else. And so I just want to say, because I'm so thankful that we're not dealing with issues like this very often in our community. I realized that from my perspective, from our office, we didn't get something out to the council like momentarily, and which is kind of hard to do. And so we'll talk about that, because I know that the council may want to hear from us, although it's busy at that time. And so when I looked back at the time frame, and Carmen sent it because you had asked the question, which was good, I don't think that's too bad of a time frame, but media comes out so fast. So the communication was within less than an hour and a half after it actually happened, and within less than 30 minutes of even when we got to talk. For me, I don't try to push communication with the police department in the middle of something happening. Kurt sent a text real quick, but I waited an hour because I thought they're really busy, right? So anyway, I just wanted the council to know I'm very mindful of your role and questions coming to you, and I do want to be quick in communication to you. And so we'll try to continue, have that at our forefront if something major like that's hitting the news. But hopefully within an hour and a half is sufficient. We'll try, within an hour or so. I know we didn't have any press releases out, and normally that's our trigger, but the media obviously went on scene and was breaking news very, very quickly. So we'll anyway, just know that I'm mindful of that. Okay.
Mayor and Council,
Morning.
good morning. Seems like I was just up here talking about the budget just so recently. So we're back again with a follow-up as promised on the travel, training, membership dues, and all related costs. So what I would like to do this morning is first go through a very brief outline of what I'm going to talk about, get the council's buy-in on the process we're doing, and then go through the data sheets and say, this is the data we're finding, let's see where it leads and what we need to do as an expected outcome of this review. I do not expect to go into, in this council meeting today, extreme detail on any one department, because I want your guidance so that I can prepare that work and then come back to you again with future recommendations. So this is more along the lines of showing you exactly what our budgets are, what's in there right now, getting guidance on the process we're doing, and then getting council to say, is this what you want to see? And then we proceed down that path. So, but first, we've got Marissa here as well. And she's a key part of this process, not necessarily on the budget side, but on the execution side. And we really need to make sure that finance is partnering very closely with them on what we do, because we're a team. And then I've also got a couple of my staff here who helped to prepare this. Diana Vilder, I think Chris Boaz is still here too, so we have some of my team here as well. But let's talk about what training, travel, memberships is trying to do for the city first off. We're looking to develop a skilled workforce. Without the skills, without the people that run the wastewater plant, the finance department, the HR department, the streets, the police, without that skilled workforce, we're a hampered city. We want to develop continuity of labor, retention. We want to keep people around as long as we can to avoid retraining and rehiring. We want to teach the core values of the city. What do we want our employees to represent if they're public facing? And if they're internal, how do we expect them to conduct themselves? What teachings and trainings do we give them? We want to maximize stewardship of city resources, and that's a key item. We have funds from shared revenues, from property taxes, from fees, and we need to maximize how we use those resources, but we need to be stewards. And we want to leverage centralized leadership training to save costs. I've seen this in probably every business I've worked at, where a couple of things will happen. You'll promote people until their natural level of ability is exhausted and they can go no further. They've taken their own natural skill set, they can promote it up to a certain level, and there they stagnate. If we augment that with the appropriate amount of training, the employee gets more value to the city, they feel we're investing in them, and we develop that continuity of labor, the retention. But we also, a part of that's going to be done through centralizing some of the leadership training and not have each department try and figure out their own path. We want to eliminate duplicative costs. If we see the same training going on in different areas, but it costs us more because we're not structuring it as a, economies of scale, we want to eliminate those duplicative costs. And with this, we want to ensure the council has visibility into the process. We have SharePoint approvals, which is the process that everybody goes through now to get an approval for travel. And we want to share with you the results of that in our presentation. So this scope of this review is primarily focused on the FY24 budget, but we're bringing in, as you see in front of you, all the data, and I'll go into those sheets, I'll bring them up later in a minute, we'll bring them on screen and go through them, but it has historical since 2023 to 2019. There is a COVID impact. You'll see in 2019, when I get there, higher costs, and then we hit the COVID in 2020, things dropped down for 2 years, and they started coming back up. We want to establish the trends that we've historically had, determine what's appropriate, and also I want to look very closely at the budget versus the actual spend rate. We tend to have a little bit of a higher budget than we do actual, so maybe we're possibly over budgeting. And we want to seek the council's guidance on the process we're doing and the next steps. So these are some of the issues that we'll bring up. We've got 2 files to go through in a moment. The FY23 travel, updated through period 10, that's the historical recap. And then we have a secondary file, the FY24 budgeted training data, where all the departments, we sent back out the training. We had all the departments prioritize their training requests from 1 to 5, indicate if they had administrative leadership costs, if there were CPE or continuing education requirements. We looked for additional explanations on some of the travel. So we basically tried to find a way of gathering information to find out what our opportunity for cost control is. And then after we preview these data files, and I'll walk through examples of these and go through a few departments. I'll even pick on finance department and walk through our budget. But after that, we'll look at council and say, it is the process that I'm outlining what you want to see. So let me bring up one of the,
While
yes,
Doug's
Mayor.
doing that, go ahead, and while you're doing that. So I'm going to repeat a little bit of what he just said, but I think just so council sees where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish today. You know how it is, we don't want to just get approval on this year. What we're really trying to do is create a new process and a foundation and ensure that council is aligned with our approach to this, because that's what's really important. Why are we doing what we're doing? Because that approach and that foundation is what we're going to bring forward as the basis for how we build the future year's budgets. And so rather than just having our focus on right now, and these numbers, really our focus is on our process so that we can apply it in the future. So that's really a big piece of what we're talking about today. And then we'll come back and we'll break it out even further after today where needed, but it's conceptual, if that makes sense.
Right. So let's go to my comfort zone with numbers. Surprise. So we've got a budget in 2024 of $1,429,000 with all lines included. I've highlighted one line in the middle in yellow. That's the old line where we used to budget everything all together. All the travel, all the meals, everything was in that one line. You look back at 2019 and you see that's the only line out there besides the memberships and dues. And in 2024, you'll see $76,000 there. That's entirely for the Nampa Civic Center and Fort Idaho Center. That's nothing to do with the rest of the city. That's just how their costs come across. So that line for the rest of the city is essentially blank. Now, we see that in FY23, the budget was $1,264,000. So we've increased the budget by $165,000. So where did that, first let's go through that increase, and then we'll go back and compare it to prior year. But the increase right here, and there's a little bit of timing between the account we closed, the 5491, and the accounts we opened. So you'll see that travel and lodging goes up 91,000, conferences up 75, and respectively these remainings. But down here, the old one goes down $100,000. So when you add all those up, the net travel and training increase was $69,000 in all of those categories. So we've increased the budget by $69,000. Dues and memberships went up $60,000, and internal training costs went up $35,000. That's $165,000. Now, when we look at this, this is what I find interesting. When we compare it over here to the right side, compared to historical actuals. The 2023 number is year-to-date through period 10. So we've spent $610,000 so far of a $1.2 million budget. So we're 80% through the year, and we've spent 50% of the budget. There are probably, a lot of these costs come through in the P-card, and the P-card processes are a little delayed, so there's more costs coming in that will show up. So let's look at 2022. Out of a budget of $1,247,000, in 2022, we spent $899,000. And that's kind of, so that's $350,000 over budget. I expect a degree of, yes, less than budget, right, less than budget. So the budget is over the actuals. And this is something we had actually a lot of progress on that this year in most of the budgetary accounts by working with the departments to get rid of the tendency to budget $20,000 this year because I budgeted $20,000 last year. So we still have work to do, and we'll continue to work on this and partner with the departments. But my belief is that if we go through, we can find opportunities to reduce the budget. Maybe not down to the $899,000, because if you look back at what we did in 2019, it was $1,049,000. Now, that was pretty much before I got here, so I can't say exactly what was driving those training budgets, travel and training budgets in 2019, but that was pre-COVID. So COVID hit in 20. I took one trip in 20, and that's the only conference I've taken since I have been here, was one trip to Las Vegas is where it was on union negotiations. That's where the conference happened to be offered at. No, I did not gamble at the casino. But that was the only trip, in 5 years, that's the only trip I've taken personally. So when we go through this, keep in mind that while we're trying to reduce the budget much more close to actuals, we had established a higher trend of expenses back prior to 2020 in 2019. Not saying that's the right level. I'm saying that the process we're going through with partnering with Marissa and you is to determine what is the right level of training and travel and membership dues we need going forward. So that's what this process is all about. What's the right level? But I do believe that we can get I'm going to throw out there, you can probably find about a 20% reduction in the budget on this one and pull those monies out and find a little bit of savings there.
Mayor Kling, could I ask a question?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Doug,
Yeah.
how did you come up with all the numbers? Actually, the 1.429, How did you come up with that? Because, or I'm looking that you have already a presented budget for the entire year, let's say for sewer, those priorities of certifications you have to have.
Right.
Or conferences that they have to have. Do you have a list of conferences that all are going to attend or certification?
We do.
Is that how you came up with this number?
Well, let's go through some of that. Let's start back, we'll go back and we'll build backwards to how I got the data and what's in the data,
Okay.
and how we can use that to help us identify some changes. So let's go to the second tab, which is the third and the fourth page you have, which is the one you have probably all looking a lot right now. And this will be a start of the process, but not the end. So let's see how that is. Okay, that's relatively readable. So what we pulled up, this is a summary, and I've highlighted certain lines on here for review. So if we look, you can see at the top line, there's the $1.49 million, there's the 1.264 in the total in 23. And these are this line, like for facilities, that 17,146 represents the totality of their entire training, travel, membership accounts. That's the 17. So you can see in their case, they went up from a budget of 5,000 last year to 17,000 this year. We'll go into why that happened, but I've highlighted in here several departments we want to talk about. And in fact, let's go to finance. Let's pick on finance here. So I have a budget of $20,920. I went up $4,000, a little over $4,000. Why did I go up $4,000? I know in my case, I went and cut expenses in another line so I could afford an increase in training and travel, because my total budget actually went down. Now, I know that's what I did in my case, because I am really convinced that we need training. We don't necessarily always need the travel, but we do need the training. Sometimes the travel is required if you're going to a conference, like if Tom or his team need to go to a wastewater conference. We may not be the mecca for wastewater conference training in Idaho, so he has to go external to find those places to learn that. But on this grouping here, let's say that I look at my training budget of $20,920, and I'll pick on myself because I'm doing the same thing as everybody else. Let's go back and look and see what I spent in 2024, in 2022 and 2023. Well, I've only spent $7,400 in the last 2 years, $7,500. But I'm basically almost doubling, tripling what I actually spent. So do I have a problem, or have I done that by, have I over budgeted, or is there a reason why I've driven mine up? This is what we need to get to in this review, is if we look if somebody has a change, what's the rationale for the change? Do they have a specific need that you and the council could support, or is it just a case of, let's put a little more money in budget because I need a place to tuck the money away? I don't know the answer in every single case, but what I'm identifying to you all, this is the process we're going to go through to say, well, if you had $7,500 in 23 and you want to budget and spend $16,000 or $17,000, $20,000 this year, why? Well, I can tell you why in my case. We'll go back to that in a second. But let's look at a couple other of these, and then after we've looked at a couple of these, then we'll go back and look at some detail to show you what makes up that budget. Why is it that level? You've got human resources. We talked about this one. They've gone up a little bit, it's $46,000 to $65,000, but they only spent $23,000 or $4,000. Well, human resources has tried for years, and this is the year we're hoping to make this happen, to bring centralized training into human resources to make it more economies of scale. We noticed when we rolled out the SharePoint process, which is our approval process, we noticed that there were a lot of training events, very well intentioned, that weren't coordinated. So we'd send 10 people to a training in Boise State, and there would be 10 individual training requests, whereas if we'd gone to them and say, I want to send 10 people as a group, we would have gotten a discount, but we didn't do that because everybody said, oh, there's a training in Boise State, let's get signed up and go. And we paid the full rate for every individual rather than having HR negotiate a training rate for us that could have been substantially lower. So the process we put into place is already starting to help us gain traction on identifying where we're spending our money and how we can control that better. We've also learned that as we look at the administrative piece, there are two types of training in my mind. You've got department or skill-specific training. My payroll department, they need skill-specific training in order to be current on all of the current laws and requirements. The overtime requirements for police unions alone are onerous. If we don't handle them correctly, we end up with a lawsuit. The Tom's team, wastewater treatment plant, it's a highly, as you've learned, it's a highly technical process to treat wastewater. They have to have skill-specific training to do that. So for the departments that run skill-specific training, we're recommending they still retain that but within their budget. But the administrative leadership budget, if we want to teach leadership skills, how to be a good manager, how to be an effective, how to get the most out of your team, how to, set the right example. That's leadership skill set. That should be the same type of general approach, whether it's wastewater, finance, HR, streets, or any other department in the city. That we can do much more effectively if we leverage the skill set that HR has and have people coordinate in advance. Hey, let me give you a specific example. We've got, under my group in utility billing, we have 4 customer service representatives that sit in the front desk. So they're dealing with, and I've done this before when I put myself through college by being a bank teller. You're dealing with people's money, it can be a very, very sensitive issue. Dealing with people's bills can be a very sensitive issue. Well, we hire these people, we bring them in at $17, $18, $19, $20, whatever the current wage is, but we don't train them how to help people solve their problems, how to de-escalate an angry customer. We don't train them we train them how to put numbers in. We train them how to put the data in. We don't train them how to relate to the people of Nampa in a way that's beneficial for everybody. So some level of that training in finance, in development services, anywhere there's public face, can be very helpful. So if we go down a little more and we look at, the human resources budget's up, but when I'm done, we'll probably go up a lot more because we'll pull it out of the departments and put it into human resources for them to manage that.
And Doug, could I also mention on human resources? So what this is only reflecting a training budget, but on human resources, so we had a position that we transferred a percentage of that budget over to the mayor's office to fund this position that we did approve through our budget process. What we did was we took that salary down by $20,000 from what was originally budgeted to bring into the mayor's position. It was reduced by 20. The extra $20,000 in the HR budget we put towards training. So there wasn't an increase in the overall budget. Actually, we were using the existing capacity for budget, and that's how that works. So I just want to say that, like for HR, it didn't go up by $20,000 in their budget. We were reallocating $20,000 out of their budget to training.
And that's part of the key, Mayor, is understanding why a number has changed before we go in and make an arbitrary, let's cut it by 20%. I mean, I have a goal of trying to get to 20%, but I don't want to go to each department and say every department cuts 20%. Let's look at police, for example.
And then I think Councilman Haverfield had a question real quickly.
You already corrected it. I was looking at the graph that was on here, comparing it as we were going along, and 23 and 24 weren't on the screen. Actually, 22 wasn't either. So now that you've slid it over, that's more what I'm looking at is the comparison of last year and the year before.
Good, we're there. So let's look at...
And Doug, just one more. Yes, Councilman Rodriguez.
You get going, dude. You want to go.
Yeah.
I need to put the brakes on.
There you go. I understand. So that was one of the questions I had of HR's budget on the training was the $65,000. Probably would have been helpful if I would have known that before.
Yeah, it would have. Yeah, I agree. But that's what I want to get to you with you here is as we look at these numbers, I want to help you understand what they are and why they're the way they are. And if I can't support a number, we change it. I mean, if I and the departments and the mayor look at a budgetary number for any department and we can't support the need for a budget at that level, then we look at changing it. What's the right number to support?
And is it, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
And is this is this 65,000, is that for the entire city or just for human resources?
That is for human resources, but human resource supports the entire city. So it's located in the human resources budget, but most of that money is aimed at supporting elements of the city.
Okay, that's the other question I had.
Yeah, it's not, they don't need $70,000 just to train their 8 or 9 staff. They need that to train the city. And like I said, when we're done, that budget may go up to $200,000, but it will be pulled from the other departments to allow her to leverage that more effectively than any single department could.
So are we taking money away from other departments for the 1.4 million in training to supplement leadership stuff?
No.
No?
No, we're not. So, and that's why if we go back to the very beginning, there are a couple key goals. Skills training is critical for the city. And so, and that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're going to be continuing to talk to staff, that skills training, which also is certifications,
Right.
very specific. And then the general leadership training we'll have out of HR. One thing I'd like to say is that as we were working on the budget this year, this is an area, each year we're trying to dig into a new area. This year we realized we needed to dig into this particular budget area. What we told the team was go ahead and put it in, but you're not authorized to spend it. Because this is the exercise that we needed to go through.
Right.
And figure out because we do want to look at our training. We want to make sure it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that we're good stewards and that there isn't frivolous spending. And you know what, I would say, while well-intentioned, I saw training that in last year's budget, it's like, serious. No, we're not doing that, right? Sending one person to a leadership conference on the other side of the country. It's like, no, that will not happen. But I will say, with the Tyler process, it's very unfortunate. It's taken this long before I could actually see the detail. Because of what we went through with Tyler and the Munis program, I couldn't see all the detail. So we have really increased the level of detail that we're getting to see, and that's why we can dig in at a whole new level. And you have to see the detail in every single department. And so this is the beginning of a process that we're going to continue on. That's why today, where council's responsible for budget, I'm actually responsible to give you a good budget, right? And to make sure that we're not having spending that isn't some appropriate spending from an operational standpoint. So the ability to see the detail and really understand what some of these expenses are. Another change that took place prior to coming in was moving to P cards. And I tell you what, unfortunately, as that decision was made right when I came in the door, the P cards reduced our ability to, prior to an expenditure, to see that expenditure taking place. That's an internal process that's changing. We're trying to bring that back because it's really hard. And so for departments, it's probably a little uncomfortable, but it's something that we have to do in going back to our goal of stewardship.
And let's pause on the P card and the SharePoint issue for just a minute. So,
Okay, hold on just a moment, if you would.
please.
So, Mayor, the reason I asked that is because it appeared that that's what was happening. And you just mentioned that you took money out of your budget and shipped it over to HR. So that's what I was wondering, is that, and then Doug had said that he had removed some part of within his budget to fulfill another position, or not position, but budget. So if we're going back and forth, shifting money around, I'm okay with that because it's fiscally conservative, yes, Mayor. But I just want to make sure that we aren't taking from others of the priority of our departments that we need to fulfill.
No, we're not.
That's
Because
all.
our goal is to, when we do spend dollars, that we're supporting each department's needs for the skills
The
training
priority,
and the certifications that they have to have, because we have to have it. And just for clarity, the budget with HR, that was a position that when we used the budget, that position's budget, because we didn't fill it in HR, and we're shifting it into the mayor's budget, but it's still going to provide some support to HR with the workman's comp and our risk management stuff.
Okay.
I didn't take the full budget over. We left 20,000 of that budget in with HR. So it wasn't that we gave it back to them, we just didn't take it all.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
A couple of things I'd like to, if I can keep them lined up in my head so I don't lose track here. On the changes we might make, Part of this goal is to seek council's approval on what we might do. So we have two options. Mayor, let me clarify a little bit. If we take and identify leadership training across the city in all the departments that is really leadership and not skill set, should we take that budget and centralize it in HR for them to control without changing the total budget, but just move the buckets and allow them to get economies of scale? I'm not talking about reducing the budget. I'm talking about giving it to HR so they can control it more effectively for the leadership training aspect.
And that's, in essence, that's
Right.
what we've done.
Right.
That's what we're doing. And the reason we're doing that is so that you don't have one-offs in a department sending their team to Boise State. Another department doesn't have that budget.
Right.
We really need, and if we can have, let's say, NNU, Boise State, bring someone in and train a larger group for the same dollars, that's where we're going.
Right.
We need to make sure that we're maximizing those dollars. And so that is, and that's an operational process
Right.
that does impact budget, but that's where we're going for being good
Hey,
stewards.
Mayor, if I may, just on that, and maybe it's a Marissa question. I'm totally in favor of that. My question is how much more labor hours is that put on HR, since the mayor says that's all already kind of in place?
Go ahead, you have to speak into the microphone.
We don't exactly know until we get there, but we already have some things in place and a lot of things that we're looking towards. And it's not our intent that HR does all of the training, although we have it.
Well, I guess I'm saying about deciding on centralized trading, what departments,
I don't know how many requests are going to come in, but we are proactively looking at options that we're getting costs and figuring out logistics where we can say, okay, we're going to set up a cohort with NNU for their lead program, and then this is how many people we can have, and send that to directors and have them tell us who they want to send, and then if we fill that
Okay.
cohort.
And so Mayor, Marissa, you are aware, and of course, a little bit of a bias here, of course, but NNU does have a leadership program.
Yes, that's what we're
in place,
looking
and
at.
that's what you're referring to. So you are aware of what that entails and so on.
We're researching that. I've met with Susan.
I know. There's, a little competition out there too that's been there for a long time, but NNU feels like they're very capable of doing that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I
And
think
they're
over-
closer.
Yeah.
They're closer, so you're not spending the time driving.
They can either come here, or it would be less expensive if we send our people there, but it's closer to send them to NNU's campus than Boise State.
Just one other little centralized question that's off the beat a little bit here is, do we have and I know this is old terminology, do we have a travel agent or somebody that's actually centralizing air flights for people who do leave the area, or is that left up to the departments and are individuals somewhat influenced by the individual air miles?
We do not have a centralized location or person. I don't know if we have enough travel to justify that.
Okay, well, if we don't, I guess that's a good thing in my mind, but I think otherwise, I've just seen that air miles and so on, and when people can do it on their own, sometimes is not the most cost effective. Okay.
That would lead actually to centralized purchasing, and Doug and I have been discussing centralized purchasing. We're not wanting to add a position for purchasing. However, we're trying to move towards centralized purchasing, which would be along that line, and ensuring also that that everyone understands what the policies are regarding travel. And I think that's an area that we can go back and reinforce, right? No first-class travel. It's kind of like the city doesn't pay for any alcohol, right? If you're traveling, you don't, and so we just need to remind, in this process, it's a great opportunity to remind everybody the do's and don'ts of all of it.
And just one little tidbit then, do we have like a food per diem?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, and I'm just curious, what is that?
it's the IRS standard, so there's a website, and it depends on
Okay.
what city they're at.
Does depend on whether you're on New York City or Twin Falls, Idaho, doesn't it?
It does.
It does vary by the
Okay. Oh, it does, okay, okay.
Yeah, thank you, okay.
Mayor
Yes.
Ting, just a point. I also agree with the centralized training, but I will not allow or agree to doing that to the police department because they are a whole different ballgame.
We'll
And we
come back to
don't.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they have very specific training that they have to.
They do. And
Yes.
I would hate to have someone from HR show what they can do. and
But
what they
hopefully you
can't
would be willing to control Captain Daniels and what he did.
Well, that's a whole different ballgame right there.
So,
But I think that's important that we do
Yeah,
keep that in mind.
there are some aspects of this that money should not necessarily be the very first consideration of what we're doing. It's the public safety and the need for the training. But that's the whole point of this. We need to identify those areas specifically and say, this is what we don't want to touch, this is what we want to touch, and not make a change that's inappropriate or causes harm, more harm than good. So let me come back to a couple issues we talked about, the P card and SharePoint. So P cards allow us to spend a little more freely, right? And so I struggle with that. It's a convenience, but any convenience can sometimes be abused. So let me give you an example of control we put into place. So you mentioned the police department, Councilor Rodriguez mentioned the police department. Well, a while ago, probably 6 months ago, Brad came to us and said, hey, I want to increase the credit limit for a specific individual. And we looked at it and said, okay, let's discuss that. Well, 2 days prior to that, Wells Fargo had sent me a notice that that particular individual, not him, but somebody had gotten a hold of his credit card number, and the individual did nothing wrong with the city. He blameless. It's just the bad actors who will do web searches and they'll identify credit card numbers and then they'll charge against them. Well, that individual's card was used for like a $5,000 fraud charges 2 days prior. So we collaborated with the police department and we looked at the limits of each individual's P card, who had them and what was needed. We're actually able to reduce the limit substantially on the exposure on the P cards and the number of P cards that were out there by collaborating with the police. That's what we want to do in this whole travel process, is not dictate to the departments, but look at them and say, listen, this budget looks overstated, let's find a way to bring it down, and we work with them together. And if they can justify why it's high, and the mayor agrees with it, and you agree with it, we're great. Now, what we're trying to do, and this may or may not be successful because it's a little bit complex, but we take the SharePoint data, the approvals that everybody sends in prior to going on requesting training, travel, or costs above $500. What I want to be able to do, if we can find a way to make this mechanically happen, is to take all the data from the SharePoint, match it up to the actuals that come through, and see how good the SharePoint requests were to begin with. The problem is SharePoint is a request for a specific travel, and all the data that comes through Munis is by object code. So SharePoint's going to list airfare and meals and travel and hotel and everything else as one group. But Munis is going to bring it through as 5 or 6 different separate postings. So how do I take those 5 or 6 different separate postings and match it up to the SharePoint? We're trying to find a way now because I'd like to be able to compare what was approved specifically to what was actually spent. That's where you actually have the rubber meet the road and you get some traction. So those are the things we're working on to try and make sure that once we set the budget right, that there's some controls in place to make sure that's exactly what gets spent. Now we also mentioned the police down here. While we don't want to, and I've said this before and outside this meeting, I said, we want a well-trained police force. They deal with things on a daily basis that most of us hope never have to deal with. So I'm not proposing going to their budget and cutting it and saying, let's cut it out. But the same we do with everybody else, let's look at the spend rate. So we have a budget here of the 3 orgs for about, what is that, $316,000 in 2024. That's the total budget. So if we go over to the actuals, in 2022, they spent $265,000. So I'm not suggesting we cut their budget. What I'm suggesting and looking is, are we budgeting correctly with what the spend are? There might be some areas where they intended to go to specific training that did not become available. But this is the same with everybody. I'm not using numbers to beat anybody up because I desperately do not want to cut the police training, but if there's a way to budget more accurately, that's where I want to head. So we've gone through, we've identified a lot of examples here. The ones in white are pretty much consistent with the prior year. They're up or down, maybe $100 or $200. They're very, very close. There's a couple that we want to dig into, not necessarily today, but part of the meeting is, so Clubhouse Centennial, everything else is very consistent with prior years mostly, but their Clubhouse went up from $3,500 to $12,008. So is this related to the purchase of the golf course, things they need to do now that we own it? Could be. Let's find out before we make a judgment and start cutting.
And
So
Doug,
yes.
one of the things too is, so for example, on golf is self-funding.
Yep.
So it's not coming out of
Exactly.
GenGov. And you look at, although the stewardship principle, for example, Public Works, those are enterprise funds. They're not GenGov tax funds. However, the principle of stewardship is the same. And so that's why the foundational principles are important.
That's exactly right. And there's a lot of that happening in, let's see, where I think I had one highlighted here. Let's go down a little bit to this line in green, the grants, the FJC federal grants. Well, they've gone from 19,000 to 52,000. But that's all grant money, and it's all driven by, it's entirely unrelated to federal or state funding from the city or from any other source. So if they have grants that are going to fund travel and training, we still put them through the same process to make sure it's appropriate, and the grant is required. A lot of times the grants are built on doing this training and travel. So they have an increase there that we probably don't want to cut it, but we want to identify it and say, if the grant's going to pay for it and that's the best use of the grant money, then yeah, that's the right path.
Well, and/or required use.
Yes.
I think that's the key. Is it required by the grant that they have certain training, and do they need the training to fulfill the terms of the grant?
So let me go over and bring up a file that you do not have a copy of on your desk, but I can certainly share it with you once it's completed. But let me change the sharing here.
And I guess let's pause while Doug's doing that, and I guess I have a question for council. Because one, we don't want to bore you, and two, we want to fulfill what your request was of us, right, from a budget perspective. So yes, Councilman Haverfield.
As I'm listening and kind of going along, making notes to myself, specifically with conferences, training, and travel, the line item 5491, conferences, training, and travel, it says it's discontinued in fiscal year '24, but there's still a value of $76,000 there.
Right, that's what I
to that a
mentioned
few
earlier.
minutes
That's
ago.
the money coming solely from the Nampa Civic Center and the Fort Idaho Center, their training budget. We have to translate their object codes into their accounts into our object codes. So we're not managing their travel and training. We're not managing, they do their own management. It just happens to come across to that account.
So when I look at that first page that you gave us of travel, lodging, and conferences, there was an increase of about $167,000. And then there was a decrease in travel and transport and conferences old of about, the delta between the two was $49,000 increase. But then when you add back in the net travel and, so I'm just putting numbers together, I'm coming up with still an increase of about $118,000. When just from a philosophical standpoint, I'm looking at conferences, in-person versus team calls, Zoom calls. How much of an increase is there in actual in-person conferences? Because there's a significant increase from $42,000 to $134,000 in your 5486 line, and then for conferences, an increase of another $80,000, but yet there was a decrease in the travel.
Right,
So that didn't make sense to me, that you have an increase of so much for conferences but not an increase in the travel costs.
Yeah. if you look at the way let's take the travel and lodging. In 2024, it's at 134,000. 2023, it's at 42,000. Prior to that, it's not used. So we had a delay in implementing the correct coding in prior years. We actually rolled out these new accounts, I think, in 2022, but it took a while to get them rolled out to have people using the right object code or account to account for their travel. So while you see an increase of $90,000 in the travel lodging for the year one,
Right.
part of that increase is offset by the decrease in 5491.
Right, and
Because
I
that's where
took
money-
that into
right,
account,
right, right.
but I'm still coming up, just like I say, from a philosophical standpoint, I see a lot more Teams calls and Zoom calls where people don't have to leave their office
Right.
to attend, and yet they're able to be a part of an overall conference with a lot of different people. That's what I'm struggling with is the differences there. The delta still comes out in what I've looked at about over $100,000.
The net increase, if you look at the bottom, my reconciliation at the bottom, the net increase with all those accounts listed above, except the membership and dues, is $69,000. That's the net travel, training, doesn't include the membership and dues, but that's the net increase in that group is $69,000 when you add them all up.
Yeah, you've modified other numbers to
Right.
get to that point.
So the whole point of this review process is to look at those requests for travel and training and say, are they the correct travel and training? There's good news and bad news. When you create transparency by adding more accounts, it takes a while for the history to catch up with what the budget does.
Okay.
So the history and the budget look off for a while until we get the coding in place.
Okay, I appreciate that, Doug. And I'm just back to the point you just asked what council would recommend.
Yeah.
And so that's where, again, if you're looking for our feedback, that's kind of the feedback that when I look at a budget increase, I look at three things.
Yep.
The reason for it, the cost associated with it, and the return on the investment made.
Right.
So when we look at those three things, and I'm putting together kind of another list of things along the other side of my page, I'm trying to make sure that I understand what we're looking
Right.
at, the reason for it, and what the cost associated with it. You said $69,000 is an increase over last year.
But let me pause you there. It's not only a $69,000 increase over the last year's budget, it's probably $180,000 over last year's actuals, right? So that kind of makes the issue a little more intense. Do we need to budget? What we're trying to identify here is what should the appropriate level of budgeting be? Mm-hmm. Should we say, let's say we were to take $200,000 out and get this budget down to last year's budgetary level. Let's say we set that as an overall goal. Then we can't really set it as a goal, but maybe it's a desired outcome. When we look at all of the travel requests and the training requests, we identify them. In fact, let's look at the sheet I've got up on the board here. This is the one that the departments submitted back to us just a couple of days ago. They ranked all of their travel and training by priority. And I'm not going to go through it by department with you, but I can share this with you. $869,000 are listed as priority one. I'm not sure that's entirely correct, but that's what's been listed by the departments. And priority two is $271,000. So let's say, for sake of discussion, we were to look at this and say, let's retain the priority one, the priority two, and we take the priority 3, 4, and 5, and we pull them out and say, we're not going to allow that expenditure to go forward at this point in time. Maybe we get $200,000 out.
So planning and zoning is an example. You've got the highest priority of almost $10,000. But in the budget description, there's 0 for planning and zoning. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask, Mayor, as far as when we look at allocations and far as proper expenditures, what would we recommend? We have nothing in here for P&Z. So is that our planning and zoning commission? I'm not sure.
Well,
anyway,
so
my point is, when I look at, again, our feedback, that would be my feedback. Are we taking care of the people that are making major decisions for our city? on our behalf. When it's zero here, I question that. When I look at engineering and fleet with zero, there's probably being accommodated under streets and traffic and maybe public works admin, but at least there's another line item for them. So is P and Z
No,
under economic
Let me
development?
make sure we're on the same page, Counselor, because,
I'm just going off of this, Doug.
oh, okay, you're going off that sheet, and I'm talking to, okay, so we're talking apples and.
Right, I don't have that sheet in my.
Right, I will share that with you, but this one is a little more complex and not quite as easily understood as the one I've given you, so I wanted to go through and explain it before I passed it out. But this is just one page of like 30, 40 different sheets in this particular file. And the attempt here was to take all of the travel and training, and you say P and Z, if I were to pull up planning and zoning, if I were to look at theirs, I should see a total travel and training budget of $11,179. If I look at their budget, that's what I should see. And Rodney's gone down and broken it up between priority 1 and priority 2.
So is that the P and Z department total?
Just him, just his department, not development services, just planning and zoning.
Okay, so they're covered elsewhere.
Yeah,
I think
right.
what you're seeing is this sheet right here has planning and zoning at nothing.
Right. That's what I circled on.
Right, that's what he's referring to. So this other sheet, hard copy, the blue one,
So when you look at training for people that matter, that's what I'm saying, you know, as far as P and Z matters,
Yeah.
those commissioners, should we be allocating something for them? For
for
training?
training.
This is 565.
Well, I think it's a good point.
Right, well, I mean, so.
You're looking at the old organization. If you go down into the yellow here in the second page of that, you'll find planning and zoning listed down there. We moved them from an organization.
Okay, so you've added,
So we maybe need to note what org this
Yeah,
is.
that was an old structure from 4 years ago, that when they were in general gov, before we moved them back to development services. And when we move them, we have to give them a new org number, and that's what's showing up here. That's the same with engineering, the same with fleet, and the same with planning and zoning. Those are the 3 orgs we have moved over the last 4 or 5 years.
It's 16510 versus 56510, which these guys wouldn't, you don't
You
need to know
normally wouldn't
that.
get into that.
Right. I
Yeah,
think,
because-
but Randy's point is,
you're asking us to give you counsel, and that's,
Yeah.
I'm going off of.
which is good, and I think that your point is a really good point. We haven't budgeted for training for planning and zoning commission members. So, Rodney, that might be something that we want to take into consideration and identify if there is training, and actually, in some ways, we should bring that training into the commission. There may not be any cost for that, to bring it in and have a day of, a time that's just training for the commission, and I
Same
agree
thing
with
for
you.
the city council, that you get people elected that might not have a background of education or training in land use planning, you know, that type of thing helps if there is a training. That's,
Association of Idaho Cities, when we have new council members, what's really important is that they go to the training that AIC provides. There is a day of training, and there's a whole planning and zoning section. There's also videos on planning and zoning, land use issues through the Association of Idaho Cities.
even
And then-
if we got a copy of those and then had them even in this location, so they didn't have to travel.
Yep.
If we can look at ways of helping train the people that are being volunteers of making major decisions for the city, instead of just focused only on city employees.
I think that's great. So, but AIC, so that training is here in Nampa, and all the newly elected, in fact, this council gets the invitation to that district meeting, and it happens twice a year. There's great training. We haven't really participated, and we really should, because there is good training that takes place, and it's right here at the Nampa Civic Center.
Okay.
So, but planning and zoning, it's a good point. So thank you. That's good.
So any more questions from the
I will try
councilors?
not to ask any more technical questions.
This is
Feel
good.
free
No.
to ask all the
They're
technical
not- they're
questions
not
you
what's
want.
being presented, so, all right.
Well,
Doug's Mayor,
Yeah.
since we're out there, Jeff's here, I'm just curious on, they have budgeted, okay, so 23, they have spent $40,000 so far in budget, and I know you're talking about proper budgeting, but they have budgeted $135,000, so we have less than 2 months I'm just curious why, I'm not suggesting that money be spent here in the next few days, but why there's such a discrepancy for wastewater? So you have $95,000 to spend in the next few days.
And that is actually, I will say, and Jeff, we will be looking more at wastewater because that's the second highest budget after police. And so Doug and I had a discussion about
I'm
that.
just
and we'll
curious the reason for that high budget for '23. And since you were here, I decided to put you on the spot.
That's good.
Oh, okay, so if there is, what Jeff, would you speak to it? You've got it right.
Well, I just want to know, the total budget in wastewater is high, but we have two big items in there, one being, Mayor and Councilman, one being our DEQ portion, which is 63,000, goes to DEQ for that, and then we
Can you
have the lower.
explain that, please? What does that mean? DEQ, when you say 63,000 goes to DEQ,
Yeah. Okay, it's our permitting for the IPDS, which is the 63,000. The other is
So
the Lower
let me-
Boise Watershed is our annual participation in that.
So have those not been paid yet? Is that what it was?
Those have been, and I'm looking at our to-date training. I can get a update. I'll look through it and I'll get an update to you.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes there's a time lag between when the training occurs and when we pay it, and that's probably what you're seeing here. If they know it's coming and they budget for it, if you look back at the prior year in 2022, yeah, they got to $120,000 in actuals.
that's what I'm just wondering what,
Yeah, and that's,
so, and also what date, Doug, is this
this is August
capturing?
10th, right?
this is updated through period 10, which is updated through essentially through July. But if it was paid on a P card,
It's not.
I may not have it in here yet, even through period 10, because P card takes another month or two to process.
So whether it be Jeff or Tom, could you explain the DEQ, that the 60-some thousand, could you explain that?
So in that line item, under training, we put our permit requirement cost to DEQ.
Is the permit requirement cost a training requirement? What exactly is that?
I don't know why it's placed there, but that's.
Maybe we need to put it in a different
Department of
place.
Environmental
I don't know if it should be a training. So we actually pay DEQ and all agencies in Idaho that are regulated under permit actually pay DEQ based on their population for them to help regulate and help manage the programs and the permit. So I don't know if it's necessarily a training. Maybe we need to move that somewhere else.
So
it's a fee that gets paid to DEQ.
Tom, what I'm saying is that 65,000 is included in that 135,000 projected budget? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, correct. So 63,500 is the DEQ portion, and then there's another 26,000, which is our Lower Boise Watershed participation.
for sure the
these might be
65,000 is not
some where
been
we
paid.
want to move that, but
Candidly, those are not training.
they're put in the training budget, which
I'm not sure
inflates
why
that
they're in
number.
training. They shouldn't, in my opinion, they shouldn't be in training because those are permit fees that should be accounted for elsewhere.
But that's
So
historic, we've been doing that historically, pronounce it correctly, okay?
Their membership dues, not training.
Oh,
is
so
what I
Doug, this number includes membership dues. That's it, I'm sorry. And so we'll have to, there is a different line that separates out the dues on a separate sheet here. And so we just happen to have them combined in this one line. But under dues and memberships.
Okay,
yeah.
could that be happening in other departments also?
Certainly, as membership dues, yes.
I mean, as far as being entered,
So, Counselor, you've hit one of the difficulties of doing a budget at any organization. When you have 30, 40 different orgs and departments, and you've got 200 accounts, people can, based on perception, budget things differently. And we try and structure that to give guidance on where things need to be budgeted. But there's a possibility of something that, and we'll see it as we go through this review. That's one of the positive byproducts of this type of review.
Well, actually, Doug, so like on the very first page, dues and memberships is called out separately.
Right.
But in the 138, right here on this particular page, so here dues and memberships are called out separately. Doug, could you go back to the page you were just on?
I can go directly just to dues and memberships, but yes.
No, that's the page you were just on. So right there, wastewater at 135,000, that includes dues and memberships.
It includes all of their training.
That's the confusion.
Everything. It's everything. This is everything all in one bucket
But
here.
dues and memberships were included in there,
Exactly.
correct? And so maybe we need to see a number that does not have dues and memberships, it's just training and travel. It just occurred to me because in that number, it looks really, really high.
Okay.
But half
we
of that
added it.
is a due and membership for regulatory.
We added it because we were asked to add it, so we can pull it back out as equally as fast.
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking that's probably some of the confusion right there, when half of that is a due and membership
Mayor, if it's
required.
consistent, I don't have a problem with it, if everyone knows that that's what's happening. I was just curious because of that expenditure, now you're saying 65,000, so I take it that just has not been accounted for yet or on the ledger, so.
Well, it's all accounted for, and I can slice and dice this number any way that makes it easy for the council to understand. That's not the problem. My understanding is I thought it needed to be in here, so we put it in. I can pull it back out and we can review this out. That comes back to whatever works. But if you want to look at it from that perspective on this sheet here, when I hover on this blue number, the dues and membership, if I click on that one, it'll take me to this tab, which highlights all the dues and memberships budgets by organization. So let's go down to wastewater and just see what that looks like. Because I've already highlighted, I anticipated that being a question. Here's the wastewater dues and membership. They have a budget of $98,000 on just the dues and membership. So if you remember the total was 134, this is where all their budget's at. It's dues and membership, $98,000. In '23, they've only spent $27,000, so they've got the other pieces that they mentioned from DEQ hasn't hit yet. If we go back to the prior year.
That right there, Doug, that answered the question.
Yeah.
That's all they needed to see. That answered the question, and for me too. It's just that, we're good.
Okay, now I repeat, I don't mind that being included as long as, I just was seeing
And
that
it does
discrepancy.
need to be included there, because that's what it is. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for the explanation.
When we look at these numbers, and this is why I tend to stay high level, because I could take this number so many different directions that it may not be meaningful for you. So, but I do appreciate the opportunity to add clarity if I mislead you accidentally. So
can we pause real quickly, Doug? I just want to ask, I'm not sure how much more you have to go through.
just one more sheet that shows what I was showing was the prioritization, but I wanted to show our review process with the departments. And so I can show that in one sheet.
Okay, let's do that. And then we'll just come back to council. We've got a few minutes left, and we want to go ahead and wrap in just a few minutes and ask council as we continue to move forward, I want to make sure that we fulfill what you're looking for from a budget perspective.
So I'll pick on finance again, but I can go to any department. Oops, where's maybe not. My panes are frozen here. Let me try somebody else. We'll do facilities there. Panes are at the top here. So we created this sheet and sent it out to the departments. We listed all of their travel. So we broke it out by the conferences, travel training, travel meals, travel lodging training, and dues and memberships. And then we have the total value. So for them, the total value of their training budget is summarized in this line by line item. We can see the biggest line item here for them is this training line where they put 11,700 and they list specific things they would like to train for. Custodians, locksmith, Mark, Brian, all these individuals virtual and local opportunities. And as we look at this type of a process, we're also listing up here the travel, and they indicate, well, we've got a travel, American Institute of Architects, AIA conference, and is there certificate and education? Yes. Is there continued education or certification related? Yes. Is it leadership? In this case, they're saying yes. I might debate that one a little bit. It might be more of a specific skill set than leadership. But we ask them to rank priorities, and then they ask, give me the support. And what facility says, this is the only travel request they have that year, is that one for AIA. And this, I remember this one came up in the conference. But when I look at their total, and you can look at it on your sheets there, the total travel for them was it $12,000, I think, on their facilities? The area that sticks out for us is the $11,700 for the, where is it? Right here, the miscellaneous training. So I would go through that and say, you've gone from 5,000 last year to 17,000 this year, and the biggest chunk is this 11,700. Is this what we need to be doing? And that's where I'd be concentrating my efforts with facilities to say, what of this is really necessary this year? And we would work to say, if you don't need it, let's not budget for it. If you didn't spend it the prior years, why didn't you spend it in the prior year? Was it just didn't have the time, the capacity, and now you have the capacity to do training you're trying to catch up on? I try and identify the reasons. But overall, I would say that there is, in almost any budget, there's opportunity to cut a little bit out that we historically haven't spent. Like I said, we spent $899,000 last year on a budget of 1.2, so that's $350,000 that we budgeted for but didn't spend. So that's theoretically an amount we could look at pulling $200,000 to $300,000 out of the current budget. I'm not saying we want to do that, but we need to identify if we can do that.
I need to really speak to this one, and I don't mean to call it out, but I will say, just so council's aware, this particular situation, $11,700 with names and dollar amounts, is not okay. Just so you know, that's not our standard. It's actually an example of what I don't want to see. Because it doesn't say, and I don't want to pull out names, but when you have a name and you have a dollar amount next to it, it doesn't say the why behind that, right? It just says, I want to spend $2,000 on this, for this. And then there's that broader area on the side that's just had a whole bunch of different acronyms. That's not okay. And so just so you know, that's not the example of what we want to do. That's actually the example that I'm saying is not okay. Yeah. Go ahead. And
I
Councilman.
totally agree, and I brought it up the evening that we originally discussed it. And the reasons for it, it's an association, it's not a mandatory requirement. And continuing education can be obtained online for free.
Yeah.
So, it's not a requirement.
Right. So let's pick on finance for a second. Equal time here. My lines, if you recall, I went from a $16,000 budget to a $20,000 budget, so I'm up $4,000. One of the things I haven't done in the past that I mentioned that I need to, and that I'm doing right now, is send my payroll team to training for all the legal changes going on and the legislative changes process that's going on. That's an increase that I haven't had in the prior years. It doesn't need to be done every year, but it needs to be done every couple of 3 years, and that's what we're doing now. But as I indicated, I also pulled money out of another budget, line item in the budget to fund this, but I've listed $7,000 in leadership training. So do I need $7,000 in leadership training, or do I take that value and say, a portion of all this, put it under the control of HR to manage that leadership training?
Well, and so what we're going to ask Doug on this is specifically what leadership training do you feel that your staff needs? And the why behind it. And then, so what we'll do on that one is, there's going to be a sit-down discussion on that.
Right.
Because for any department, I'd say, okay, what's the why behind $7,000 for leadership training when we're trying to go to consolidated leadership training?
Right.
And so we'll look at skill sets that we think we're needing to accomplish. Now, payroll is, and that's a good example, is a very specific skill set.
Right.
And so to ensure that we're in compliance, now it doesn't necessarily say how many people are going to that training, if it can be, you know, all of that. So that's the next level of detail, and that we'll continue to work through as we go through this process. So,
Mayor,
yes.
Excuse me, Doug. You hit on what I have my notes here that I need to express. Number one is that in our training budgets, I see my priority of compliance. That's the first thing I see. The second thing is our priority for the benefit for the city of Nampa community. And the third one is for the employees' benefit, of course, because of the rate that now we're paying for certification that they have, which would be a benefit to them. The other thing is, but I know you keep talking about leadership. It initially sounds like it's just a catch-all word. Yeah. And I don't know that we need that in there for the leadership, because we only have a certain amount of leaders in this community here in our workforce. So if you could break that down as to why we are stressing so much on leadership, that just doesn't make any sense.
Well, keep in mind that this was the first run, and at the time we had not had the discussion to how to effectively, we'd had interim discussions on how to centralize the leadership training. But don't think of leadership training as just for me or a director. Leadership is a continuum. You give the appropriate leadership training to a staff accountant. You give the appropriate leadership training to a director. But at some level, leadership needs to be fostered. Some people have a natural skill to it. Some people don't get it, and they need a little bit of help. But it's finding the appropriate level. And I call mine out here because at the time I put that in, I did not know exactly what that was going to look like, but I knew that my team needed some leadership growth. I promoted, half my team is most of my team is brand new. They've been here for a year and a half. We've got Chris Boas doing a great job. He's been here for, almost 2 years, I think, right? We've got Leslie. She's been at her job less than a year. I've got my payroll specialist. It's been in position for like a year and a half. As we move people to new positions, I want to make sure that they are given the resources they need to do their job to the best of their ability. Not to overtrain them, but that's part of this process. So I put the money in there by cutting it from me, right? I put it in there by cutting it from somewhere else with the expectation that I would get back with Marissa and saying, how can we effectively use this, and where do we have the opportunities? And that's what I want to see across the city, is not just a blanket check. And yes, you're right, leadership probably is a little vague on its outset, but it's the starting point that gets us to the next step.
Leadership is compliance.
Yeah.
Understanding compliance.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's happening through supervisory training. It's understanding how to manage FMLA. I mean, there's a whole number of different things. So we're about out of time.
Yep.
And I think, Councilwoman Jangula, hi.
Just to capitalize on the leadership thing really quickly, is leadership isn't just about the departments itself. As city employees, every employee has to be a leader in their field. You know, I mean, we could give a million examples, but there could be a mom at a park that sees a Park and Recs, you know, employee there, and she feels weird about this guy, and she's like, I don't know, he's being weird around kids or something, and she goes to him because he's a city employee. He needs to know how to handle that, or direct her, you know, as to how to handle that. I mean, so we could give a million examples, but every single one of our employees have to be leaders, so they need to be given training and skills to be able to be in the workforce and be a good representation for our city. But really quickly, I just want to give, I jot down a lot of things. So my recommendations would be, I want to separate conferences, trainings, and then leadership in 3 different categories. Leadership, we can just shove all under HR. I know that's a big task, but if that's the direction that we're moving, it just makes sense that we take that out of the budgets for individual departments themselves and just give it to Marissa right now. And then also underneath those conferences and trainings, it would be really, really helpful if we could see what CE requirements, so like that be one, is there an online option, yes or no? And then what's grant funded matching opportunities, see those separate. anything that's specialized wastewater. I mean, as a council, we want an informed and educated staff, because I can assure you, as long as I'm here, I will not care to or take the time to learn how to treat wastewater, right? Or anything else. So I need good staff that knows what they're doing and educated so that they can report to us and we can make informed decisions. We have to work together, so we want informed staff. So if we can see what would be specialized, and then if there's like a miscellaneous need and then miscellaneous wants or something of that nature, so we can kind of say, hey, you know, we haven't really done a lot of wants lately, but maybe this one would be kind of really good and it's not really required, but this could be good. We can kind of work those in. We're not trying to be sticklers, you know, we just want to make sure that we're using the funds appropriately. And so I think for me, the transparency of just being able to itemize them would be so much easier for my brain to be able to really see what each department needs. And I'm not for a full cut 20% from everyone, because everyone's needs are different, you know, and they're going to vary from year to year. So I think if we can just see that specifically in each department, that would be so helpful for us.
So, Mayor, if I may, Councilwoman Jangles, so are you, I mean, I would be interested, and I think you probably are including that, but also to be seeing what are the required, we have the amounts here, but the required certifications and licensing for each department.
Yeah, so I put CE required online, if there's an online option or a travel option, whatever, just so that we can know, you know, because we understand in different departments, CEs are required, they're gonna be, you know, and so we don't want to rob anybody of that. We know that they need those things, but for us to be able to differentiate them between these are what they actually need to perform their job, that helps us see that.
Yeah, and I guess I would just end on, I'm pretty, you know, black and white on things, but and I realize there's always exceptions, but if you don't have to travel to get a certification or a licensing or whatever, then in my eyes, there's no reason to be traveling.
I couldn't say yes or no.
I realize there's
And you
maybe
don't need
exception to
respond
the
it
rule.
Because we're of time, I'm not going to have you
Yeah.
respond, so thank you for that. This was good, I wrote it down, I really appreciate that. And then Councilman, I want to make sure council has a chance to share what their wants are, because we're out of time.
Main thing at the end of all this, thank you for your presentation, is, Mayor, at the end of all this, do you think you're getting the metrics you need as executive officer for the city to determine our investment and the return on that investment? Is there a way that you're being able to be provided the information to verify that this is taking place?
This is the first year that I've gotten to see the detail that I've needed to see. And so, which is good. We're moving in that direction with the Munis program in Tyler. It's been crazy hard, but we're there today. The thing that we're going to be asking now for departments that are sitting here listening is that they're going to need to break that down for us. And so we'll go back and ask them for that very specific level of detail. And so what I wrote down, I think I want to make sure we captured it, that you want to separate out the conferences, training, and under training, it's the required certifications and specialized training, so that we know what that is under training. And then, as Darrell said, he wants to see if some of those certifications can be obtained without travel, because that's a priority to save on travel. And then the third bucket is leadership. And leadership, and Councilman Rodriguez, I totally understand what you're saying, because we are using that one word. There's a whole lot that goes underneath that. And actually, when we provide the training, it is broken out different than that. And we could show you some of the training that's been going on just in the last 2 months that's very specific, but it's under, quote, leadership. But because there's customer service training, there's crucial conversation, or candid conversation training that's happening. So there are a number of different things underneath that heading.
Okay, I would have liked to have understood that before.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, there's a lot more that goes under that. So I think, and Councilwoman, did I capture what you shared to make sure that we actually accomplished that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this was really good feedback. This is the kind of feedback that we were hoping to achieve today. Doug, thank you. There was a tremendous level of detail. And so what we don't want to do is get caught up in too much detail, but principally the high-level overview of where we are. And I think, Doug, do you feel like, as we look at this, I believe, and Doug, tell me if I'm correct on this, that we actually can separate out in our budget, because we've already gone there, conferences, training, and leadership. Do you think we can accomplish that in our report out?
Most of that, yeah, but the difficulty is we're talking a very large data set, and I can present the number any way you want, but Councilman Haverfield may want to look at it one way, Councilman Jengle another, and Council Richter. So I can't.
I think they just
Yeah.
gave us the direction, though.
Yeah.
I think the direction is there.
But let's say that you want to say, let's identify this travel and how much is CP. Well, how much is the CPE cost? Well, the CPE is in a different line, so how do I tie those together with, you see, it becomes complex. Not undoable, just complex in reorganizing. And this one point I need to share. This is a multiplier, right? It's only a $1.4 million budget out of a $120 million budget. But it's a multiplier because it impacts so much more. But when you give direction to do this, keep in mind, if I'm going to spend 2 weeks doing nothing but this, that's 2 weeks I can't do on something else. So it's important and I will do it.
I think the key is that we've already got the information. Part of this, I'm going to say, this pushes down to our internal leadership team. We need you guys breaking out what it is, because I think we can do it. I think we've got the codes, we're already there. We just need it broken out. And so we had an example of what we don't want to see. We're going to have them come back and say, okay, we're going to break this out, and then we'll go through the approval process internally. But I think we can do it. What I don't want to do, you know how you can spend so much time tracking data that it's a waste of time? But I think the high level that you just mentioned is something that we can actually accomplish, and then the departments have a responsibility to provide us the information. And I think we can do it, Doug, without you spending a lot of time on it. I think this is something I'm going to say, we need better information from our department heads.
Excuse me, Mayor, Doug, when I look at the accounts payable, all that's in there, but that's after the fact. Is that what you're referring to?
Say that again.
And in accounts payable, I see all those costs. So that's already in there? Why?
The accounts payable through the current year is in there, yes.
Yes. But doesn't that?
But it's not broken down at this level, no.
No.
I thought it was.
And in fact, that's that's a whole different discussion that Doug and I have had. That gets really hard. And Doug and I have had that discussion, because trying to tie the budget to the actuals in these codes
by event,
by element is really hard in the detail.
In total, yes, it's there, easy to do.
Right.
By event is what I want to get to, but it's more work.
Okay.
So we have to be conscientious of what we're asking as far as a requirement. So we'll come back and we'll dig through this. And Doug, thank you. This is a ton of work for Doug. So what we want to do is be transparent. We want to be good stewards, but we also want to be careful on the workload that's associated with tracking at the level. I think we're going in the right direction, and this feedback was really helpful. So thank you. Doug, thank you.
When you're
Kurt?
now, I don't even think of this, Doug.
Yeah. I would like to just give just a couple minutes to Kurt. If you have anything you'd like to share, obviously it's a public record, but just updating your council on how it's going.
Mayor, Council, good morning. Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I just want to say, first off, thank you. I know our command staff received a lot of texts and phone calls yesterday of support, not only for the officer, but for the agency as a whole. So we do appreciate that, and it doesn't go unnoticed. When we get that information, we make sure we share that with our folks that are actually out there doing the work. So yeah, yesterday, luckily, was an anomaly for the city and for the PD. It's been almost 2 years since our last officer-involved shooting. So the incident yesterday, I'll just say I was very impressed and proud of the response that our team had out at that incident. We did receive a text I was going to share with council. Oops, I closed it out. It was from one of our medical professionals that we work with our TACMed team and developing our medical training to the officers. So they sent a text just saying, can you pass on a good job for me? To the officer that rendered aid to the suspect today, he did an amazing job with medical treatment and had 90% of it done before the medics arrived. No other agency would have been so advanced with CARE. So that tells me that the training our officers are receiving, they're taking it to heart, they're learning, and they're able to do some really good things out there. Yesterday, I will say, was a long day for a lot of our folks. A number of our patrol officers, our evidence and crime lab, along with our detectives, came in at about 3:30 to 4 in the morning. We had a search warrant that morning, then the officer-involved shooting, and then we had another incident late last night that required detectives and our crime lab out. So it was about a 20-hour day for a lot of our folks. So we'll work on getting them some sleep and rotate, hopefully get them home early or have them come in late today. But again, thank you for your support. The officer is doing well, given the circumstances. It's very traumatic for the officer and his family, but we'll make sure he has resources available and the help he needs for him and his family as he processes that situation.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that update. So thank you. You know what? We have such an amazing team, and I so appreciate it. This is where training also comes in. That's so important for our police team. But I love it that I don't have worries with our team because we have phenomenal leadership. We have great people. We're trained well, and it's excellent. So I thank you. I appreciate the work, and thank you for this update.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, that is the last item that we have on the agenda. And so, any questions from anyone? Okay, I'd stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Bye, Dale.
Bye.
Bye.
He's still alive. Whenever you're getting all the information together for council.